I never imagined my grandfather's well would spark a vicious HOA feud until Linda Harper dumped concrete into it while I was out of town. She had no clue I'd been quietly setting a legal trap for months. What would you do if you learned your neighbor's vendetta wasn't just about petty rules, but a family grudge spanning decades? I still recall the day I inherited Grandpa Henry's farmhouse. The lawyer handed me a faded envelope with trembling hands. "Your grandfather was adamant about this property," he said. "He wanted it to be yours." Inside was a hand-drawn map of 5 lush acres in Pine Hollow estates, including the stone well that had watered the farm for over a century. I ran my fingers over the worn paper, tears welling up. Grandpa had taught me to pull water from that well when I was just 8. 2 months later, I moved in. The farmhouse needed repairs, but the land was breathtaking. The well stood tall in the side yard, its stone ring rising like a relic from a storybook. I spent my first weekend clearing weeds and fixing the wooden roof that shaded it. My neighbors, the Millers, dropped by with a basket of cookies. "We're thrilled someone's here again," Emily Miller said. "Your grandfather was a gem." I thanked them, offering water from the well. "First thing I did was test it, still pure as ever," I said. Tom Miller glanced uneasily at the road. "Just so you know, the HOA's gotten stricter lately. There's a new board member who's big on rules." I chuckled. "The HOA doesn't touch this place. Grandpa made sure of that when it was formed. I've got the papers." Their relief should have tipped me off. 3 days later, I was tending my vegetable patch when a shadow crossed the dirt. A woman in a pricey tracksuit stood by my fence, her dark hair in a tight bun, oversized sunglasses hiding her eyes despite the overcast sky. "You must be Henry's grandkid," she said, skipping introductions. "I'm Linda Harper, HOA vice president." I wiped my hands on my jeans. "Nice to meet you." Your well's an eyesore," she cut in, jabbing a manicured finger. "The HOA mandates uniform landscaping. All water features need approval." I took a steadying breath. "Actually, this property predates the HOA. It's exempt from those rules." Linda's smile tightened. "No property's exempt from community standards. I've noted several violations." She snapped photos of my yard with her phone. "I've got the legal docs," I said evenly. "Grandpa negotiated terms when the neighborhood started. This well's historic and my water source." "We'll see," she replied, turning on her heel, her designer boots crunching gravel. That night, a certified letter arrived. 3 violations: unapproved exterior features, non-compliant landscaping, unsafe structures, each with a $100 daily fine. I called the HOA president, James Carter. "I get your concern," he said hesitantly, "but Linda's right about standards. If you've got exemption papers, bring them to the next meeting." After hanging up, I rifled through Grandpa's files in his old pine desk. There it was, a 1982 agreement from when Pine Hollow Estates began, listing his property as historically significant, its structures preserved forever. The next evening, a knock brought Clara Evans, an elderly neighbor. "I saw Linda at your fence yesterday," she whispered. "I need to warn you. Last year, while my husband and I were away, she had our lily pond filled in, called it a mosquito risk. We'd had it for 25 years. My stomach churned. How could she do that without permission? She waits till people are gone, then claims it's urgent," Clara said, her hands shaking. Over tea, she shared tales of others, Mr. Lawson's shed demolished, the Carter kids' swing set torn down, the Gomez family's cultural gate removed. That night, I couldn't sleep. By flashlight, I stood at the well, tracing the stones Grandpa had tended so lovingly. Linda's intensity unnerved me. The next morning, I called a water rights lawyer, a security firm, and the State Historical Society. "That hand-dug well could be protected," the society rep said. "They're rare now. We need to document it." Security installed cameras, some obvious, some hidden. My attorney, Rachel Torres, reviewed Grandpa's papers. "This exemption's airtight," she confirmed. "But HOAs can get nasty. Log everything." I started a meticulous record, photos, letters, daily yard shots, stashing copies of the exemption in my car, bag, and a waterproof box by the well. For weeks, Linda paraded inspectors by my house. More notices piled up. At the HOA meeting, she dismissed my exemption, saying it needed their lawyer's review. Neighbors split. Some backed her, others quietly urged me on. The Millers brought dinner one night. She's splitting the neighborhood, Emily murmured. But lots of us are fed up with her bullying. Tom nodded. The Gomezes are fighting her too. She wants their house repainted an approved color. I had to leave for work the next week. I checked my cameras, locked up, and asked the Millers to watch the place. I've done all I can for Grandpa's legacy, I told myself as I drove off. That well's lasted 100 years. It can handle one petty neighbor. I was dead wrong. Linda was about to hand me the ammo I needed to fight back. Rain pelted my windshield as I pulled in after a week-long trip, craving a shower and my bed. My headlights swept the yard, then froze on something odd. Where the well stood was a gray lump. I bolted out, rain soaking me, flashlight revealing a horror. The well was a concrete blob, the wooden roof shattered nearby. No, no, no. I dropped to my knees, hands on the cold, hard mass. A light flicked on next door. Linda stood on her porch in a robe, smirking. I stormed over, fury blazing. What did you do to my well? The board voted, she said coolly. That hazard had to go for safety. You should have complied. You had no right. It's exempt. She handed me a paper. Emergency Action, Section 8.3. Immediate risks allow corrective measures. We sent notices. Your neglect forced us. My hands shook. I was gone a week. Proving you can't maintain it, she said, glancing at her watch. It's late. Take it up at the next meeting. She shut the door. I called the police, standing drenched as I explained. The officer was kind but firm. This is civil, not criminal. Take it to court. My security footage showed Linda guiding a concrete truck onto my land the day after I left, directing workers as they poured. The next morning, I showed James Carter the video. He paled. I didn't know they'd fill it. Linda called an emergency meeting with just 3 of us, said it'd be a safety cover. She destroyed my water source and a historic structure, I said. He looked away. She showed us papers for a temporary fix, not concrete. Rachel's eyes widened at the footage. This is illegal, beyond HOA power. Your deed has riparian rights, and the historical registration was approved 3 days ago. It's a protected site now. My trap had snapped shut. She's liable for vandalism of a historical landmark, Rachel said, grinning. We'll file today. 4 neighbors waited at my house that afternoon. Clara spoke first. We saw what happened. We're with you. The Gomezes had photos of Linda scoping my well the day before. Mr. Lawson overheard her booking the truck. Emily Miller questioned the workers, who cited emergency HOA work. She's gone too far, Clara said. I sued Linda and the HOA. By afternoon, James called, panicked. Board members want to talk. Linda faked the paperwork. We didn't approve concrete. You'll testify? Yes, this is out of control. Hope flickered. Then a brick smashed my window. A note read, drop the lawsuit or worse. The police took it seriously this time. Threats and damage are criminal, the officer said, bagging the note. That night, a news van arrived. A tip about HOA terrorism had leaked. I spoke. I just want Grandpa's well back. It's my water and our history. The story aired at 10, sparking calls from others with HOA nightmares. Linda countered fast. Flyers hit every door, claiming I'd ruined property values with my dangerous hole. Some neighbors glared. Others rallied behind me. Linda approached with 2 burly men. You've messed up, she said softly. That well's not historic. Your grandfather knew it. The state says otherwise, I replied. Records can change. Accidents happen, she said, nodding at my house. The men claimed to be HOA inspectors. We'll need inside, one said. Not without a warrant, I shot back. Linda smirked. We'll get one. Who knows what we'll find to condemn this dump? One man's tattoo matched the brick note's handwriting. I called Rachel. She threatened me. Document it and leave tonight, she urged. I'm filing for an emergency hearing. Packing, I stared at the concrete-filled well. This wasn't just about rules. Linda feared something deeper. The truth would unravel everything I thought I knew about Pine Hollow Estates. The courtroom buzzed as Judge Bennett took the bench. My pulse raced, but Rachel squeezed my arm. Linda sat with her slick lawyer, oozing confidence. I've seen the filings, Judge Bennett said, frowning. This is one of the ugliest property cases I've handled in 20 years. Rachel presented our evidence. Footage of Linda pouring concrete at dawn, the historical certificate, altered HOA docs. James and 3 board members testified Linda misled them. A forgery expert exposed her fakes. Linda shoved her lawyer, spilling his water, as her composure cracked. That well was protected, Rachel said. And we've got more. Police found her prints on my client's car after the brake lines were cut. Linda exploded. He's harassed me for months. That well tanks property values. The judge banged her gavel. Ms. Harper, sit down or leave. The detective confirmed Linda's late-night sabotage. During a break, neighbors whispered apologies. Back in session, Linda's lawyer claimed she acted in good faith. Objection, no violation history exists, Rachel countered. Judge Bennett asked, did you check water rights before filling it? Linda faltered. It was an eyesore. It's a legal water source, the judge said. You violated riparian rights. She ruled for me. Full restoration, $175,000 in damages, Linda's HOA ouster, and a restraining order. As Linda stormed past, she hissed, your grandfather wasn't so pure. Ask about the Dawson deal in '76. I froze. Dawson? That night, digging through records, an old man knocked. I'm Walter Dawson, he said. Your granddad saved my farm in '76. Linda's dad wanted it for cheap. Your grandpa funded our irrigation and kept quiet when her father's scam surfaced. Next day, workers found a metal box in the well, deeds, bank records, photos. Grandpa had sold land to Linda's parents with covenants protecting natural features. Her family's fraud unraveled. In court again, Judge Bennett voided Linda's ownership. She pleaded guilty to mischief, avoiding jail, and cataloged historic sites as penance. The HOA dissolved, replaced by a heritage group. My well, restored, became a landmark. At its first water flow, neighbors celebrated. James handed me Grandpa's letter. Water reveals truth. Protect what matters. I traced those words often, grateful for the legacy of courage he left me.